Hello, everyone. It's Sunday once again. Welcome to another. Oh my God! Sorry, I'm just so like look at my face. I think it's also like white and everything, but I've got no time to change the lighting now. But anyways, yeah. So welcome to Ask the Drummer. Sundays are actually my favorite day of the week because I get a chance or an opportunity to have a chat with some awesome drummers. And this week, talking about awesome drummers, I just thought I was just talking to him before coming on live. He is just so amazing. He's really, really good. And he's not just, I mean, I'm not saying that just a drummer, but not only is he a drummer, but he's also a music teacher. A sound and lighting engineer as well, a record producer, and oh my god, he owns his own studio, recording and teaching studio. And he's also a YouTuber. How cool is that? I mean, he's just really is amazing. And he looks he looks like he's only in his 20s as well. I don't know. Maybe he is in his 20s, but we'll find out. So, my dear friends, please welcome Tony Bryant. Did I say it right?
Hello,
Did I say
Tony
Bryant
Bryant.
or Bryant?
Y-
Bryant, yeah.
Bryant, yeah,
Hello.
Bryant's perfect. Before we
Yeah.
start the round, we've got to get something out of the way. There's no way that I'm anywhere near 20 anymore. That was a long, long time ago. I think the camera must be lying because that's definitely not true. I'm very, very, very close to 40. So let's just get that out of the way before we do anything else.
Oh, what you do? You do look like you're only in your 20s.
Like, it's
How are
very
you?
kind.
How are you,
It's very
anyways?
kind. Yeah, really good. Thank you. I'm really excited to be here. So thank you so much for having me on. I
Oh
really
no,
appreciate it.
thank you for saying yes. And I just want to sort of like ask, how's your wrist now? I hope
Yeah,
you're
so
feeling better.
that's a really good question. So you kind of joined me at a really interesting time in my drumming career because I haven't really played much over the last year because I've had carpal tunnel syndrome, which I think is fairly common amongst drummers. So it might be kind of quite interesting for drummers to hear the story. But I've just had the tunnel operation, which they call the carpal tunnel release, and that was about a week ago. So I'm kind of in the healing process of that. But I mean, long term, hopefully what it means is I will actually be able to play drums again. And the surgeon thinks within kind of 6 to 8 weeks, I should kind of be back to almost full strength. Which for me would be amazing because it's kind of been a kind of 3 years of it kind of getting gradually worse, and finding gigs and playing drums really hard, and eventually leaving the bands I was in at the time, and kind of turning down any other gigs or any other kind of drumming opportunities. So that's where I'm at. So yeah, so fingers crossed, a few more weeks of kind of healing time. I've got to have the
Yeah.
stitches out, but yeah, it's the
Is that
outlook
like
is good.
is that like a common thing for drummers, or because
Yeah,
I know
it's
that
very
tinnitus is one of those things that
yeah.
a lot of drummers get.
Of course, yeah,
So
that's carpal tunnel because it's kind of basically what carpal tunnel is. For those that don't know, it's when the median nerve that kind of passes through the tunnel, and the carpal tunnel itself is a very kind of narrow space in your wrist where all the tendons and the nerve pass through. For someone like a drummer or people that use a lot of power tools, that kind of repetitive use and kind of vibration, like that kind of impact that you get when you, particularly when you hit things like a ride cymbal, eventually can kind of aggravate the nerve. So the symptoms are kind of very numb fingers. So you kind of lose the feeling in your fingers, particularly these 3 fingers. You lose the kind of strength in your hand, and you kind of get a lot of pain around the kind of wrist and in the hand as well. So for a drummer, it's a
yeah,
nightmare really, because what you can't do is you don't have any strength here, and you can't really feel these fingers. So when you're trying to put a drumstick in here, you can't really hold on to it. So the drumstick ends up either like flying out, or you end up trying to change your grip so the stick's kind of sitting in here, and you can't really play like that either.
oh
So for a drummer, it's a nightmare. It's one of those things that a lot of drummers get.
yeah,
But yeah, but fingers crossed. Um,
fingers crossed. Yeah, yeah,
fingers crossed. Um, this will help it. The release. I think it's a fairly common surgery, and I think it does help a lot of people that suffer with it.
yeah. Well, it's funny you said that because this I've been taking tablets or medication, and
Yeah.
it's funny because carpal tunnel syndrome apparently is one of the side effects of it, and
Oh,
I
really?
mean, it's like yeah, which is weird because I didn't realize that it's actually that's what you had the wrist operations for that
Oh,
time to come, and oh, it's just crazy.
yeah.
It's
Funny
like maybe
coincidence.
that's yeah. And now it sort of like makes me even more connected to drummers because
Yeah, that's
somehow.
true. Yeah.
Yeah. But anyways, so last time I saw you was at Preston Pop Festival
Okay.
last year.
Yeah. Yeah. That was really good fun.
Oh God, that's festival was just amazing.
Yeah.
I really, really loved that festival. Did you stay for the whole 3 days or were you just
Um,
there for
I
Sunday?
think we left on. I think we drove home on the Sunday. I think,
Yeah,
from my
yeah,
memory. But it's funny because I think you posted a video, didn't you, of me playing with Jetstream Pony from that festival, and
yeah.
I can really hear when I watch that video. To me, what I hear is really like carpal tunnel playing, and that particular song is quite a fast tempo, and I can really hear that I'm really struggling to kind of keep up with that speed because the carpal tunnel was quite bad at that point, and I'm kind of missing
Okay.
fills where I would normally play kind of drum fills. So for me, that video really kind of sums up that time of like really kind of having to work extremely hard to kind of get through a gig. And so yeah, it was really interesting that video. It's kind of really reminded me of why I kind of wanted to get the surgery to really kind of work on
All
not
right. So
not
you've been having so you've had this sort of like this problem since last year. It's not just
yes.
sort of like it happened this
No, it's
year.
been about 3 years, and it has got gradually worse. And what happened is with the Popguns, who we haven't really talked about yet, but the Popguns were the band I was playing in, and that's how I first met you, as through playing with them. But
Yeah,
with the
yeah,
Popguns, it kind of got to the point where I couldn't really do a whole gig anymore. It was getting to that stage where I was really kind of unsure whether I was actually going to get to the end of a gig or even and some rehearsals as well. And that kind of stress and the kind of anxiety that causes to a kind of performer, gets to the point where it's not really kind of viable because it's not only the fact that it might kind of fail you during the gig or it might be really hard to get through it, but it's also the kind of build up to those gigs, not knowing what's going to
yeah,
happen or
yeah.
not kind of yeah. It's I
Okay.
think
Well,
I think my memory of that Preston gig is that we hadn't rehearsed with Jetstream Pony because we couldn't get all together. So we did a rehearsal in the afternoon before we played. So I'd already played a whole set, or I think we played it through a couple of times. So by the time I'd kind
yeah.
of done the set twice, my carpal tunnel was really bad, and then I still had the gig to do in the evening. So it was like,
Oh no. Well, I remember when I saw you on stage, I was like, I know him, but he's not. Because of course, I was expecting Hannes to be there.
yes, of
But
course,
then I saw you, and then I was like, he's not the drummer of Jetstream Pony. I know him, and I remember I was sort of like, he's the drummer of the Popcorns, and that day when you played at Preston Pop, that's actually the day I found out that Sean Sherman is the original drummer of the Popguns because
yes.
he told me about, and he's also like the drummer in the Wedding Present,
Yes.
which that's another reason why I love that festival so much because that's where I got Sean to guest on as the drummer.
Yeah, and I love that. I love that episode as a kind of friend of Sean as well. It was really nice to
Yeah,
watch that
yeah,
episode of Ask the Drummer with him. But yeah, so for people that don't know, so we should probably just explain. So Sean is the guitarist from Jetstream Pony, if in case anyone's watching that doesn't know. But he's also a drummer as well, and he was the drummer in the Popguns before I was, which is how I first met him. But yeah, and then before that, he played with the Wedding Present as well. So it's been really interesting, actually. For me, obviously, I met the Popguns first. I played drums with them for 10 years. And then the next kind of stage of the journey was meeting Sean and becoming friends with him as well. We both played
yeah,
drums for the same band. That kind of tied us together. But then he kind of introduced me to his new band, Jetstream Pony, and then came and saw the studio where I'm at now. This is my studio. And since then, he's kind of been here. They've rehearsed here. We do recordings here sometimes for some of their releases, and I kind of engineer and mix their
yeah.
new releases as well. So yeah, so it's a small world in the kind of Brighton music scene, that kind of in the indie world.
It's a small world.
Yeah.
But anyway, so yeah. Welcome to Ask the Drummer.
Thank you.
Episode 56 is all about you. Tony or Anthony Bryant. Well, you're talking about so like being small, so like a small world, or something. Am I right in thinking that you're from born in Brighton, or
Yes. Yeah.
born and
Born
raised
and
in
bred.
Brighton? Yeah, born,
Yeah.
yeah.
There's not that
So
many people in Brighton that kind of are from Brighton. It's fun. It's a funny place because with kind of two big universities and a music college, a lot of people come here to study and then stay. So, but you know, there's a lot of people in Brighton that aren't originally from Brighton, but I'm not one of those. I was actually born here and
born
yeah,
in,
grew up
yeah.
here. Yeah.
Well, I was gonna say because nowadays I think when you hear Brighton or when you sort of like think of Brighton, immediately you think of Fatboy Slim.
Yep. Yeah.
But he's not really from Brighton, but now he lives there, doesn't he?
He does, yeah. And the funny thing about him is that he owns a big cafe in a park down on the seafront. You might have heard this story before, and he lives near there as well, quite close to the sea. And all through lockdown, he decided he was going to go and work in his own cafe. So he would be there just kind of serving ice creams and cups and coffee. And you think like this huge kind of artist who, you know, like when I was a lot younger, he was massive, wasn't he? You know, and
Yeah.
and you just imagine lockdown, he's there kind of giving people like a 99 with a flake, you know.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
That's really good. I want to say hello to Sean Charman. He said hi,
Sean.
Tony. So yeah, we were just talking. I don't know if he's heard it, but we were just talking about you, Sean, and telling so like our friends how you two met and how Tony became the Popguns drummer, which was Sean originally the Popguns drummer.
Yeah.
But anyway, so other famous bands from Brighton that I could think of, apart from the Popguns, of course.
Yeah.
There's 40 Nice Bears. Of course, I
Yep.
saw Robert Tequila last Friday as well with Jetstream Pony and the Orchid. And also Fraser Chorus.
Yep.
Do you remember them?
I know the name. They're not a band I'm particularly familiar with, but I know the name.
It's really young, because like I said, you're only in your 20s. So
I don't say that. It's not true.
No. But yeah, Fraser Chorus, that's a band that's also big in the Philippines. So like
okay.
amongst the Filipino new wavers.
Yeah.
Because they have this single called Dream Kitchen, and that's really good. And I think Freeman, is it Tim Freeman, or it's related to so like the actor who's Freeman? I think it's Martin Freeman or something like that. But yeah, they're quite so like popular in the Philippines as well.
Okay.
Yeah. So what was it like growing up in Brighton? Like especially so like the music scene there, or were you in this all like from a musical family or something?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. So my dad is obviously a massive influence on me kind of becoming obsessed with music, and he definitely was obsessed with music himself. And he was a kind of DJ. He played a lot of the kind of like Brighton like rock clubs before I was born. So he was kind of within the music scene, but he never actually played any musical instruments himself. So I think in a way, I think he always wanted to, and I think if he'd kind of had other opportunities, then maybe he would have become a musician. But I think I was kind of like, for him, I kind of lived his dream a little bit of wanting to be a musician. So he, for a lot of years, he kind of acted as in my kind of first proper band that I was in. He became our kind of road manager. He was our live sound engineer. Kind of, he spent a lot of time with the band. He owned a PA system because he was a DJ, so he used to kind of come along to gigs in pubs in London and set up a PA system and microphones and a light show, and all of those things kind of became a big part of kind of my musical kind of learning, my kind of early gigging days, when I first started playing in bands, when I first started doing gigs. Yeah, and he really because I used to go and work with him as well, so I would kind of go along and help him set up and kind of setting up PA systems and lighting systems. That really kind of never left me, really, that kind of love of that world, that kind of performance world, and that's probably now why I still kind of flip between the two. I'm kind of a drummer and I play instruments, and I'm a music teacher, but I'm also an engineer, like you said earlier. I still like I'm very much into technology, into editing, into those type of things. So I could never choose, I suppose, is part of the problem. I could never kind of choose one route. I was kind of, so I've always kind of put myself somewhere in the middle. I'm not quite just a musician and I'm not just an engineer either. So I'm kind of somewhere in the middle. You could say,
you're really sort of like music. It is like you're into music itself, musician, engineer, producer, everything. But I believe you started really early, like in like schools or like doing the engineering side of like sound and light engineering school. Was it school bands?
It was at school, it was. I was really lucky actually. I went to a school where they had kind of, I could get really involved. I was kind of working in a theatre and in the school theatre, but it was a fairly well kind of resourced space. So we had lights to play with, we had PA system, and they used to kind of, I think there was a local kind of company used to come in once a year and do some training with us, even though we were kids. They would kind of come in and teach us things about lighting and sound, and that kind of grew and grew really. And my first kind of jobs kind of after school were working in theatres. So I did a lot of like dance shows and theatre productions, doing lighting and sound, working as a live sound engineer a lot, particularly in Brighton, and a theatre called what used to be called the Gardner Arts Centre, which was a lovely theatre attached to Sussex University, and it's just such a lovely space to work, and it was such a lovely theatre, and I learned so much from doing that. It was great.
Yeah, well, I've when I was doing my research about you, of course, I found out that Brighton is actually like a creative city. It's sort of like a very creative city, and so like a lot of musicians so like go there, or not really from Brighton, they go to like Fatboy Slim, they go there and stay there and do their music things from Brighton. So so what was your sort of like first band? Or I should say that with all this sort of like engineering things and sound and lighting and everything, what got you into drumming? Or were you sort of like, did you play other instruments before the drums? Or?
Not really. I mean, I think I had piano lessons like a lot of kids do when I was very young, but wasn't really that into the kind of material that the teachers were choosing, like kind of getting me to, I think I was learning Greensleeves at one point. I just wasn't inspired by that kind of style of music. It wasn't didn't really like just capture my passion. And I can remember being allowed to stay up late and watching the Freddie Mercury tribute concert, which was on telly. I remember Mum and Dad kind of letting me stay up late to watch it. And one of the first, I think, I'm not sure if they were the first band on, and they're not a band that I particularly kind of rate as a major influence now, but the first band on were Metallica, and they came onto the stage with this humongous white drum kit, kind of 2 bass drums. It kind of filled like the whole back of the stage with Lars Ulrich. I just remember being kind of fascinated by watching a drummer on telly. And the sound and the kind of energy was just so incredible. I think that was the first time I really thought, actually, that looks really fun. I could do that. I'd love to play the drums. But that was a long time before I actually started playing. And then as kind of time went forward, I think I kept on kind of reminding Mum and Dad that I really wanted to play the drums. But there was no way at first that Dad was going to want a drum kit in the house,
It's going to be too loud.
They're not, drum kits aren't designed for houses, are they? Really? So it took a long time. I think for quite a number of years, I'd kind of keep on asking, can I get a drum kit? Can I have a drum kit? Can I get a drum kit? And eventually, I think they got so bored, or especially Dad got so bored of saying no. I think eventually, in the end, he did actually say yes. And I think I was about 12, possibly, when I got my first drum kit and started taking lessons at the same time. And it never stopped really from there. I think actually from quite early on, so maybe from kind of 13, 14 when I joined my first band, I don't think I've really ever not been in a band until kind of now. And at this point in my life, because of the carpal tunnel, I've kind of stopped playing drums and I'm not in a band at the moment, officially. So I think that this might be the first time, this might be the only time since I was about 13 that I haven't kind of been in a kind of active band. So yes.
I bet you really miss it.
I do miss it. Yeah, I do miss it a lot.
Well, I really hope you'll feel better soon, and it will heal quickly and things. And all that.
I'm
Well,
sure we'll see. Hopefully, we'll bump into each other somewhere around at another gig.
yeah, yeah. Aiden O'Rourke said they're all looking and sounding good. He's actually my husband. He's doing he's my sort of like support tech.
Yeah.
So if anything goes wrong with us, the drummer, he's the one who helps out. So
Hello.
yeah. So you already. Yeah, you were in a band, but is it like school band or is it sort of like
Yeah,
bands
it was.
that go gigging in Brighton?
It started as a school band. It was called The
Yeah.
Drive, and it very much was a school band. We met at school. We were friends at school. We started playing together, but it carried on for a long time. It wasn't kind of a school band just for a year or two while we were there. We ended up kind of at the height of it, moving to London together, kind of living together, rehearsing kind of 3-4 times a week, and gigging a lot in London. So it kind of it grew in. It never quite reached the level we wanted it to. We never kind of really had that big break that we were looking for. But certainly as a kind of learning experience, playing around all those kind of Camden venues, and kind of Islington, we played a lot, and kind of North London. It was great. It was such a fantastic way of kind of learning, how to be in a band, how to play gigs, and I'm still friends with those guys now. We still see each other. We got together for my dad's big birthday, which he had recently. We kind of reformed the band and played together again. It was a great experience and lovely times and kind of happy memories from those days. It was very much kind of Beatles orientated. So I'd never really heard the Beatles because we didn't listen to the Beatles at home. It wasn't a band that my dad really liked. So I didn't really know the Beatles, but the other three members of the band were obsessed with the Beatles. So all of the songs we wrote were very much kind of 3-way, 4-way harmony based with a kind of Beatles style. But I was kind of covering and we used to cover Beatles songs as well. And I'd end up playing songs that I'd never heard. I remember one of the first songs we ever learned was Help by the Beatles, but I'd never heard the original. So I was just kind of making up what I thought the drums would sound like, having never actually listened to the record, which is quite interesting, quite fun.
Oh my god! So what were you what sort of music were you listening to when you were so young and when you were a teenager?
Do you know what? I actually made a list. So I thought you might ask me things like this. My memory isn't brilliant. So I've actually on my screen, on my computer screen, I've made a list of a few things in case you ask me certain questions. So yeah, we grew up. My dad was absolutely obsessed with Bob Dylan. So we listened to a lot of folk, like people like Bob Dylan. We listened to a lot of bands like REM, Bruce Springsteen. Obviously Led Zeppelin, and a lot of kind of 70s rock as well. So yeah, that was kind of his thing. It was.
I'm actually just surprised because I know I shouldn't just assume that everybody knows about the Beatles because I'm sure there are also people who've not heard of the Beatles, but it's just they're the biggest biggest band ever.
I know.
And,
don't get me wrong. Don't get me wrong. I was quite young at the time, so I did then go back and kind of explore the Beatles later. But I just didn't at that stage in my drumming career. I didn't really know who they were. If I'm totally honest, it's funny because my wife's parents are kind of almost 10 years younger. Sorry, 10 years older than my parents. So she very much grew up on the Beatles, and the Beatles were massive in her family. Because her parents were kind of that just 10-year different generation, whereas my dad was quite young when he had me, so he was kind of from a slightly different era. So the kind of Beatles had already come and gone, and he was more into those kind of 70s rock bands, and that kind of then got passed on to me. So I guess it's just a slightly different, influences.
Well, talking about Bob Dylan, I'm actually getting to know more and more about his music and liking his music. But I mean, to be honest, I prefer other musicians or other artists singing Bob Dylan songs. Instead of Bob Dylan. I don't know if there was one time a few years ago, I went on rock radio in Manchester. So I don't know if you know Mike Sweeney, but he's a DJ and a musician as well. But it was his show, and then I went on it, and then I said something because it we're talking about cover versions, and I mentioned about because I love Guns N' Roses, Knocking on Heaven's Door. And I didn't really know at the time that it was a Bob Dylan
Yeah.
it was a Bob Dylan song. Until, of course, because of the internet and all, you find out. And
Yeah.
I said that I actually called Bob Dylan a bit bland. I was like, ooh. And then I don't think, I think it upset quite a lot of people.
Yeah. I'm sure he's used to, he's used to dividing opinion, isn't he? I think that's the thing about Bob Dylan. But yeah, I mean, for me, it was, he kind of installed in me a kind of love of kind of storytelling and lyrics and songwriting. So I think for me, a lot of the music that I listen to now, maybe I don't listen to Bob Dylan that much anymore, but I definitely think the music that I do listen to is kind of influenced by that kind of growing up and kind of listening to him as a kid. But yeah, so yeah, it's just part of that musical journey, isn't it? It's interesting how where these things come from. And,
yeah, and these songs are just amazing. I mean, there's one particular one, "I Shall Be Released." I just really love that song so much.
Yeah.
But anyways, but it's sung by other musicians. I think it's the band do so, like, or maybe that's his band as well. But anyways, So I was gonna ask you if you had drumming lessons, but then I found out that you've actually got a professional diploma in drums. So,
yeah.
So obviously you did. You had drumming lessons.
Yeah, it's a really interesting question though, because obviously with the drums, a lot of people do learn just from the kind of learning songs, and a lot of my musical learning was just doing that. It was putting on my favorite album at the time and just playing along from start to finish. And I used to put things like the Manic Street Preachers, like one of my favorite albums when I first was starting on the drums was Everything Must Go, and I just used to put that on and just play through from start to finish. And the same with other bands like Catatonia. I used to put that album on. I used to put on I can't remember the name of the album, but I just used to play that album from start to finish, and a lot of my musical learning was that. But I did also have drum lessons. I had a couple of kind of great drum teachers who really inspired me. One guy was called Dan Nash. I used to go to his house and have a drum lesson, and then he was the first person who actually allowed me to play live, because he used to take me along to his gigs, and a lot of them were just like pubs in Brighton, and he'd be playing covers with some other great musicians, and he would just come off the drums and he'd say, "Oh, you just come and play a couple of songs." And I can remember doing things like Rolling Stones' Satisfaction, like one of the first songs I played live with his band, and a few others as well, maybe Black Betty. And it was just that, once I'd done that, once I'd actually taken that kind of musical learning from the drum kit and in my bedroom to actually going with him and going to a real gig and being able to get up and play with a real band, it was so exciting. And that once I'd done that, there was no way I was going to do anything else but be a drummer. And that was it was really kind of an exciting time as a young person, to be able to do that.
Actually getting a professional diploma in drums. I mean, it's like for you, it's when people sort of like say that they just sort of like learn from like the songs that they love and everything, but actually getting it from I think it's called BIM Institute.
Yeah, it's the Brighton. Well, they've got a few. I went to the Brighton one, so they've got a Brighton Institute of Modern Music is BIM. So I did a professional diploma. Again, kind of similar to what I said before. I could never really choose. So when it came to kind of qualifications and leaving school, I didn't really know whether I wanted to play music or to learn how to record music. So I actually chose a music tech degree. So I went to Huddersfield, up in Yorkshire, which I loved, and I spent 3 years doing a music tech degree, and then the diploma in drums came kind of after that. I kind of did it in the wrong order really, but I kind of felt like I really wanted to come back to Brighton, B, kind of meet a lot of musicians, and C, get a qualification in performing as well as recording. So BIM was perfect for me for that. I got a qualification in performing drums. I met loads of musicians, which I went on to work with quite a lot afterwards. And it was just a great experience, really. So
you're already a drummer in several bands or a band before you actually got a degree in drums.
I mean, I wasn't really
playing.
I had been playing a bit, but I think that's quite normal. I think most of the people that I was there with were kind of similar. I mean, I was a little, maybe I was kind of like 3 or 4 years older than a lot of the people that were there. So a lot of people there went straight from school. I went and did a degree somewhere else and then went. So I was about 4 or 5 years older than maybe some of my kind of classmates.
So you know all these, so like paradiddles and all those things.
Yeah. But you know, yeah. If my hand wasn't like this, I'd happily play one for you, but I can't today. Not today.
No, so it's just ever since I found out about those paradiddles, I just find it really funny that that's why I always try and mention those paradiddles and stuff.
Yeah.
So
you can't say that word enough.
Yeah, that's right. Well, I was gonna say, I mean, that carpal tunnel, is that also from twirling as well?
Yeah,
Have
maybe.
you ever sort of like twirled as well?
I know how to stick twirl. I've never really been. I'm a kind of thinking stick twirler. So if I'm sat at home or sat at the drums and I'm kind of working something out or learning something, that's the kind of time where I might kind of twiddle a stick round. But I'm not really a kind of showman, in the middle of the gig, kind of sticks flying everywhere. I've never been that kind, as you well know. I've never been that kind of drummer. I'm the kind of drummer who puts everything as low as possible so I don't have to move too far to reach things. I'm not the kind of cymbals up here to kind of make it look like you're working harder. I'm not that type of drummer.
No. So let's talk about the Popguns, because is that your You've had sort of like other bands before the Popguns.
Yeah.
I don't know if you want to sort of like talk about the other bands that you were in, or did you get recording?
I mean, I was in other bands. I've played everything really. I did blues kind of function work. I did kind of wedding function bands, cover bands. I used to go down to Cornwall a lot and play kind of cover gigs in holiday parks and hotels. I've kind of done all of those type of gigs as well. But I was in a kind of grunge band called New Sun Blues, which is probably the band I've kind of been the most creatively involved in, and they're probably closest to my kind of perfect. If I was kind of going to choose a band and choose the style of music that really said like this is me, that would probably be the band I was in. Unfortunately, it kind of coincided with me getting a job in a school. And I was offered the opportunity to kind of train to be a teacher and to be a kind of qualified secondary school teacher. And I couldn't really turn that down at the time because it was a kind of guaranteed kind of route into employment that I was finding hard at the time. So that kind of coincided with the band, and the band kind of fell apart because of that, because I was having to give so much time to kind of learn how to be a teacher and to do my teacher training, that band fell apart. And then obviously after that, so we've kind of jumped forward a kind of couple of years. That's when I first met the Popguns. And that was such a kind of, for me, such an important moment in my musical journey. Meeting those guys was so special, and I feel so lucky to have had that time with them.
What year was that?
I think it was about 2010 or 2011 I first met them.
Right. And how did you meet them?
How did I meet them? Yeah. So the first Popgun that I met was Greg, who's the lead guitarist, and he worked with a bass player who I'd played in a blues function band with. And Greg at work told his friend at work that he wanted the Popguns kind of weren't playing at that point. That the Popguns wanted to start gigging again, but they didn't have a drummer. So his friend at work said, "Oh, we've got to check out this guy Tony." So Greg phoned me up and said, "Do you want to meet for a pint?" And we met in the pub in Brighton. We kind of had a chat, got on really well. He was just a lovely guy. He's so easy to get on with. And he said, "The most important thing I need to ask you, I might need to disappear just for a second to demonstrate this." I'm back. Right. So he said to me, the most important thing I need to know is how do you hold your drumsticks? So people that are drummers or might not know, you can either, with your left hand on the snare drum, you can either play with your hand like this, which is called traditional grip, which is how a kind of like a lot of jazz and old school drummers would have played, or you can play matched grip where you have both hands around the same way. So he wanted to know that I played like this he wanted me to be a kind of rock drummer rather than a jazz drummer. So once I told him that I do play like this, he was happy, and that was my first audition. And once I told him that, he was happy for me to kind of go and do a proper audition and meet the rest of the band and learn some songs. But I don't know what would have happened. I don't know what would have happened if I'd learnt like this, and if I'd shown him that this is how I hold my drumsticks. He might have said, "You're not the one. You're not for us." So yeah, so that was my first experience of the Popguns and Greg.
That's very interesting. So rock drummers actually do like that one. Like,
yeah, I mean most modern drummers hold their sticks the same way. They're matched grips of both hands around the same way. That you do. Some people do still play like this. There's a lot of really successful drummers who play traditional style. There's a lot of drummers that can do both. That you'll kind of see them flipping between two. Like really advanced drummers will know both techniques and will kind of swap, even swap within a gig. They might swap between the two. So yeah, but the kind of modern way of playing is like this.
Yeah, and that's how you got the job.
Yep.
I wonder if Sean actually does.
I'm pretty sure. Like yeah, I'm pretty sure Sean plays like this as well. Yeah. Maybe he can comment.
Yeah, because I've seen you first time I actually saw you in Manchester when you played with the Popguns. I remember that I saw them at Shine On.
Yeah, but I was there.
Yeah, you were there as well. So that was yeah. Did you like that? Shine On.
Yeah, I mean it was. It's funny because I wasn't that aware of Shine On before we got invited to play. I wasn't that aware of it, that it even happened, but it was such a great weekend. And one of my favorite bands when I was a bit younger, when I was kind of getting into music, was Idlewild. I absolutely loved them. I used to go and see them quite a lot when I was kind of at uni and stuff. So I've always loved that band, and they were one of the headline bands, I think, or maybe just second under headline that weekend. So to go back and see a band I hadn't seen for years, and kind of playing songs that I remember from those kind of like early days was so special. It was such a kind of magical experience, and I had such a lovely weekend. It's a great festival.
Yeah, I love Shine On as well. It's a shame that I'm not going this year, but anyways.
Yeah, it's soon, isn't it?
Pardon?
I think it's quite soon, isn't it? I think it might even be next. Is it next weekend?
From the 11th of November until the 14th, I think. Yeah. So, anyways, I've got other sort of like gigs to go to. So I'm sad, but next year, hopefully, fingers crossed.
You're never short of gigs to go to.
Yeah. Well, Sean said that it's definitely the rock way, so he does it like that. So,
good. Yeah, I'm glad.
Yeah. So, do you like 2010? So that's like a long, about 10, 12 years.
Yeah. So I can proudly argue with Sean and say that I was the kind of longest serving Popguns drummer, because it wasn't just me and Sean. They did have other drummers as well over the years, and they have had a few. But I think by quite a long way now, I played with them for over around 10 years ish. So I think I was the longest serving drummer of the Popguns. But we did so much cool stuff together. They got obviously their kind of relationship with Matinee Records started when I joined, and the kind of 2 albums that we did together on Matinee was amazing. And then we've kind of been all over different places. I kind of I've played a lot of gigs over the years, but never really kind of gigged abroad. So the Popguns were my kind of route out to playing gigs in Europe. So we did Paris, we did Athens, we did Berlin, Hamburg. We went to New York and did the New York Pop Fest together. All of those type of gigs I've never really got the chance to do. And kind of as a young person, that's what you dream of, isn't it? It's going off to cities and playing gigs in all these kind of cool places. So the Popguns really gave me that opportunity, and I'm really grateful to them for that. That was quite. We had some fun times, flying around Europe and playing gigs.
What would you say is your sort of like favorite gig or favorite country to sort of like play gigs in?
Yeah, that's a really good question. They're all so different, and they all kind of have such different experiences. I think maybe Athens was particularly special. So we went to Athens and played a kind of what looked like to me from where I was sat a kind of full venue. And you'd never expect, as a kind of Popguns member and a kind of, you just never expect to go to Athens and play a kind of almost sold out show in Athens with the Popguns.
Yeah.
And they knew every word. They were singing along. It was really special. One of those magical gigs. But it's I don't know whether not everyone will know, but I'm diabetic as well. So I have diabetes. So I'm insulin dependent. I'm diabetic. And during the sound check, I had a kind of moment of hypoglycemia where your sugar levels go really low, and I kind of blacked out and fell backwards off the drum stool onto the stage because I needed sugar to kind of bring me back to life. So this was it was, and you imagine for the rest of the band, they kind of looked around and suddenly Tony's disappeared. Where's he gone? He's like fallen back. So it's kind of this was the kind of build up to this kind of, we'd flown all the way to Athens. We'd done the sound check. It had gone horribly wrong. I think what had happened is we'd ended up walking because there was some kind of protest in Athens. So we ended up having to walk the kind of last bit to get to the venue to do the sound check rather than go in the van that they kind of bought for us. We ended up having to kind of get out the van and walk to the venue. And I think during this kind of long process of getting there, I just hadn't kept an eye on my sugar levels like I should have done. And before I knew it, they'd kind of plummeted really low. And I kind of, so then after that kind of leaves you feeling a bit kind of stressed, and it was a really stressful, especially for the band as well, probably even more for them than it was for me. And then
scary.
And the promoters are all there worried about whether we're actually going to be able to play the gig, and they called an ambulance and all this. As the kind of the time went on, I think everyone was kind of panicking that we'd flown all the way to Athens. We weren't actually going to be able to do the gig. But in the end, once I kind of gone back to the hotel, slept it off for a couple of hours, obviously had some food and brought everything back to normal, we just played the gig, and it was incredible, and it had this amazing atmosphere. And actually my mum and dad flew out as well to watch the gig. It was one of the only times they've been abroad to see me play. So they flew from Brighton, from Gatwick, and came and saw us. So to have them there was really lovely as well. But so it was that's probably, I don't know, I could choose lots of Popguns gigs, but that's probably one that really stands out for lots of different reasons.
Yeah, well, I didn't know that you're diabetic, but that must have been really scary though, because
it was scary. I mean, these days, so what I have now on my arm is a Libra sensor. Can you see? Which is one of these. So these have become really popular. But back then, when we played Athens, I didn't have one of these. So it was up to me to kind of keep an eye on my sugar levels by manually testing. Whereas now, I have a sensor on my arm. It's linked to my phone. If my sugar levels go low, an alarm goes off on my phone and gives me warning that it's going to happen. So the situation I was in Athens will never happen to me again, because now I'm monitored constantly with this. My phone's there. It will just set off an alarm anytime that my sugar levels start to dip, and then I know that I'm safe. So so that's been life-changing, really.
Oh my God, that's modern technology. But I believe that gigs outside the UK, they're also like musicians are looked after. They give you lots of food and stuff, and everything. Which I think a lot of the musicians, they actually prefer going abroad or going to Salt Lake. Doing lots of gigs abroad.
It's funny because I always wonder what kind of European bands think when they come and play in England, because it's so the opposite. You'd be lucky to get a lot of gigs. You'd be lucky to get a packet of crisps, and a can of Stella. That might be, but it's so different gigging in England, isn't it? So I often wonder what European bands must think when they come here. They must think it's awful. They must.
No, I really like that skin there behind you, that Popguns. So, it's this one here. Sugar Kisses. Oh, I don't know if you can see it, but I
can see it.
Yeah.
I've always loved a kind of printed drum skin. Let me see if I can show you. So up on the wall in my studio, I've set. I'm just going to change the camera.
That's Jetstream Pony there. I was sort of like.
Yeah, so there's a Jetstream Pony one behind me, and then up on the wall up here. Can you see this?
Yeah.
Up on the wall in the studio is other bands that I've played in. So the one in the middle is The Drive.
One of my that's the one that you were talking about before, and now it's gone. Oops. And now you're gone.
I'm still here.
I can. Yeah, there you go.
I don't know why it cut out. Sorry about that.
No,
so yeah,
that's fine.
yeah. I'll try once more. There we go. So you can see the rest of the studio. So this is Sunny Studio.
Yeah.
This is. I think it's frozen again. Maybe I'll stick with the one camera.
Well, no. Yeah, maybe yeah. But that's where that studio is actually where the magic happens, and that's your house, I believe.
Yes, I'm in a really lucky position where we had. So around the time I stopped working full-time in a secondary school, I started to build the studio. And at first, the idea of this space was just somewhere where I could set up my drum kit and practice and learn songs before gigs. So I knew that I had to soundproof it because it was just a kind of a single brick garage. So I kind of went on this really long journey of learning how to soundproof a building, and kind of watched a lot of YouTube videos about soundproofing and learned all about acoustics, and ended up, the more time I spent out here in this space, the more time I realized that actually this really could be a workplace for me, not just a space for me, but it could actually be a job of full-time employment, because I was already teaching music but in schools, so I knew that I could teach from here. I could kind of do music tech lessons. I do kind of online lessons, and teach drums as well. I knew it'd be a really nice teaching space for drums, but also a recording space, you know. So the bands and singer-songwriters that I work with, they come here, they can record vocals here, we can record drums here, they can record guitars, and it's just a really nice space to work in. And it being so close to the house, I think it feels quite relaxed. It's a bit different to that kind of stressed environment, that kind of red light pressure of being in a professional recording studio that a lot of people find. The kind of atmosphere here is very relaxed. It's kind of, you know, the house is there. We can go in and make a coffee. You know, we can kind of use the garden. We can sit in the garden on a nice day, and then come in here and do some recording or rehearsing or, you know, whatever it is as well. So yeah, so I'm really lucky. My commute to work is the quickest. I literally have to walk across the decking from the back door to the studio. My commute to work takes me about 20 seconds, if that, less than that.
Yeah. Well, so you stopped teaching in secondary schools now, so you don't do that anymore.
Yeah, so I did that for about 10 years, and loved it for a long time, but it's a really full-on place to work, and I think what kind of happened is, once I had kids of my own at home, it was very hard to balance that kind of really full-on work life and working a lot of hours, even like once you're home, you're still working. So I was doing, you know, kind of massively long days, and I reached a point where I couldn't really balance that anymore with kind of family life. So I knew that something had to give. So so I don't work in secondary schools. I do go into primary schools a little bit. So part of my work life at the moment is I go and teach harmonica in a primary school. Last year I was doing a bit of music classroom teaching in primary schools. It just kind of, it's variable, you know. Sometimes I'm working here, sometimes I'm doing video editing, sometimes I'm doing podcast editing, sometimes I'm doing music drum teaching. It's you know, it's so varied, but this is the perfect space to do all of those things. So, you know, I can sit here and video edit, I can sit here and record, I can do voiceovers, you know. It's perfect, really. It's really a really versatile space.
Yeah, and you're also giving private tuition in your studio as well, so people can actually ask you if they wanted to teach, if they wanted to learn something, like maybe how to play the drums. And
and the same with music tech. I do online music tech lessons as well, or face-to-face, if people want to come here and learn about, you know, miking up a drum kit or how to record or how to use Logic or any of those type of things. I do all of that as well, so if anyone's interested.
Well, I've mentioned earlier that you're also a YouTuber, because I've stumbled upon your YouTube account, your YouTube channel, and saw like really good videos of Wendy Pickles, and
it's lovely, that one.
Yeah, so well, on the Acid Drummer website, I'm going to post a link on your, so like showing your YouTube channel, so that people can actually have a look at it. But so when did you start? When did you start becoming a? Because that's a thing nowadays, isn't it? That people.
It is. I mean, I'm I wouldn't. It's funny. I wouldn't call myself a YouTuber. I definitely haven't reached those kind of heights of, that some people do, turn it into a full-time job. But in terms of the studio, for me, kind of creating videos of people here is such a good way of advertising what I do. It kind of almost became a kind of way of advertising the studio to start with. So I kind of had the idea of the Sunny Studio sessions where people would come and do a kind of live performance of a song or a couple of songs, and I'd film them and record them kind of at studio quality, but then put it onto YouTube. So Simon and Wendy with their English Weather Project came and did a few songs. I've got some other friends who are kind of a blues duo called Smokestack, have come and recorded a few songs on the, and it's just a really nice way of showing the studio. But also I love YouTube. I spend a lot of time on YouTube, and the kind of just being able to kind of contribute a little bit. I've kind of tried things out. I've done some kind of product testing videos where I'm kind of testing different mics on a snare drum. So there's one of those on my YouTube channel. There's quite a few kind of lockdown videos where I've kind of put songs together. The Popguns did a couple of songs where we were kind of all at home and they sent me the videos and I kind of mixed it and put it all together to create a kind of lockdown version of a couple of Popguns songs. You can find that on my YouTube channel as well. I've done some, even like kind of there's some music videos on there. So again,
there's one was doing a cover of the Franken Walters. After all, that's a really good it's a really good video with the horse.
You'll have to watch. No one else is going to know why there's a horse in a Franken Waters video. It's so funny. You have to go and watch it to find out. But there is definitely a horse in that video.
No, that's really good. So like I said, so it's promoting your studio and you call it Sunny. Where did that come from? Why is it called Sunny Studio?
So this is interesting because the studio was obviously like the kind of change from a really kind of stressful time in my life and a really kind of stressful time around work to kind of a brighter kind of future. So the kind of idea of working here and kind of being self-employed and being in control of my employment, it kind of felt like the kind of sun was coming out a little bit from quite a dark time, a place where I was really kind of quite struggling. So that's kind of where the sun comes in a little bit. But at the same time, the name of the road that I live on, where the studio is, has got Sunny in its name. So it's part of the name of the road as well. So it kind of made sense in lots of ways. And I like the word Sunny. It's kind of because obviously children come here for drum lessons, so a kind of Sunny studio feels kind of like child friendly, but at the same time it's not kind of so child friendly that adults would think Sunny studio, that sounds like a kind of primary school. So it kind of felt like a name that kind of covered everything, that kind of just it's kind of multifaceted.
No, it's a really nice name, that Sunny Studio. And also I'm gonna add a link to the website, the Sunny Studio website, in case anybody's interested, learning a few things. Because another thing that I found out is you're an expert in GarageBand.
Indeed, yeah.
The first time I've actually heard of that is when I had Fliss Kitson of the Nightingales, and she's talked about writing songs and using GarageBand, write songs. And at first, it didn't click on me. I thought she had a garage band or something, because that's a kind of band as well, isn't it? So garage band.
Of course,
But you're actually an expert, because you know all the technical side of that.
Let me know.
There we go. We're live again. I'm so sorry about that. But
no problem.
I think it's not happened for a while now, but it used to happen quite a lot, when I started the podcast. But I think I don't know, but sometimes I panic, but now because it's happened for a few times, I just we'll restart and then we'll just edit that bit.
Exactly.
Well, I'm glad that you're still here, and so we were talking about your studio,
Yeah, so we were talking
Right.
about, I think we were talking about, you were asking me about GarageBand. I was saying
Yeah.
that the best thing about GarageBand is it comes free with iPads. So people can, and it's so powerful, you know, you can actually plug and I found this out the other day because I went and did a profile for an artist. So she's a sculptor called Nick Acaster. And I went and did a kind of artist profile of her. I went to her studio and filmed her there. And I actually took my sound card from my studio and I plugged it into my iPad and I could actually record microphones straight into the iPad, into GarageBand, just using one kind of small adapter. So GarageBand is really powerful for recording, and for people kind of learning about music tech and writing songs. There's so much you can do on GarageBand. So I do teach GarageBand, and quite a lot when I was at school. We used to do a lot of, when I used to work with secondary school kids, we used to do a lot of kind of GarageBand teaching, and we teach them how to do songwriting, or we did a lot of kind of cool projects where they'd have a video and they'd have to kind of write music to fit with an advert or with a video, you know, those type of really fun kind of music projects. So yeah, so anyway, so the studio is great, and I love working here. I just love spending time out here. It's just such a nice place to be, you know. And kind of, I think for a lot of musicians, I think certainly for me when I was younger, the kind of idea of having a space where everything is just set up and you can just come through the door, and if you want to record, it's just a case of pressing, you know, turning the computer on and go. It's not that kind of, you know, like long process of trying to get everything out and set it all up. By the time you've done that, you've kind of lost the enthusiasm for what you were trying to do in the first place. So I think for me, this is like, you know, this is a kind of dream, and it was certainly a dream when I was younger. So I kind of have a space I can play drums, I can record drums, and work with artists is just amazing.
Yeah, I mean, you are fascinating because it's not just so like, you know, every single thing about, you know, the technical side and the drumming side, and then, you know, I bet, do you play other instruments as well?
I do a bit, yeah. I mean, certainly, yeah, I play guitar a bit. I've never really gigged as anything apart from a drummer, but as a kind of producer, you kind of, and certainly as a secondary school music teacher, the expectation is you just turn your hand to anything. So at one, you know, as when I used to work in schools, I could be 1 week, we could be doing a kind of ukulele project. We'd be teaching 30 kids at a time how to play ukulele. The next week it would be keyboards. So I'd have like 30 kids playing keyboards, and I'd be teaching them how to play keyboard. And then we'd go on to guitar, and then, you know, and then you're doing composing, and then you're doing, you know, and it kind of just jumps, and suddenly you're teaching them about world music and samba. And so, you know, it's you have to be, I think maybe that kind of working in schools for 10 years, it's kind of made me realize that if you need to do something, you've kind of just got to find a way to get to that end result. So what you just said isn't totally true. I don't know everything, but I think I know enough to kind of find the solution. Put it that way.
For any sort of like music problems, you've got a solution for it.
I think the more things you do, the braver you feel just to try things that are outside of your comfort zone. You know, once you're kind of in that world. I often say the same about DIY. I was really lucky as a kid. I used to go, my dad was a kind of carpenter and a builder, so I used to go out and work with him quite a lot, which I think is where the kind of the studio, that kind of knowledge I learned from him, allowed me to kind of do the studio conversion. Because apart from the plastering, I actually did all the soundproofing. I built the desk. I built all, you know, I kind of did all the kind of building work in the studio as well. And a lot of that is, you know, once you've done a few little jobs like that, you can kind of, you just feel brave enough to try. And I think that's kind of crucial, really. It's just giving things a go and finding out how to fix it when it goes wrong.
Yeah, that's amazing. So in Brighton, you're probably sort of like the go-to drummer in case someone, you know, like a band needs a drummer. Then they'll sort of like contact you and then say, "Are you free? Can you do this or something?"
Yeah, I mean, more in the past. Yeah, certainly more in the past. I think, again, since having kids, getting out and gigging isn't as easy as it used to be, because I mean, my little girl's only 5, so she's, you know, she needs still a lot of care. I think as the kids get older. So when I met the Popguns, they were kind of, I don't think they'll mind me saying, but they're I think some of them are more than 10 years older than me. So for them, their kids were kind of quite a lot older than my kids. So they were at the stage where their kids were quite independent. You know, they could go off and do a gig in Manchester and leave the kids at home, whereas there's no way I could leave my kids at home. Too little. So I think I haven't, haven't gigged as much as I used to when I was younger and before I had kids. I used to gig a lot, but not so much now. But I'd like to get back to it, and I think as my kids get older, I think I'll probably return more to that world again, and hopefully being well with
get
this.
Get your rest better first. So, but what's new with the Popguns? Are you doing an album or any?
Well, I'm not actually the Popguns drummer at the moment. So about a year ago, I had to say I can't do it anymore because of my wrist. So they've actually got a new drummer who's played a few gigs with them, as far as I know. I was kind of hoping that Simon might come online because he tends to be around for these type of things. So Simon from the Popguns, but I don't know whether he's probably not actually there. But he's the person to ask. He's the wealth of all knowledge Popguns. So there was certainly around the time that I left, I'm sure they won't mind me saying, there was definitely kind of new music in the offing, and Simon had written some new songs, and we had just about started rehearsing some of the new material. So if they're not planning it imminently, I'm sure for Popguns fans, the new Popguns music at some point will be there. I love that band. It's funny, when I first met the Popguns and I listened to kind of a lot of I kind of learnt their entire back catalogue almost, and a lot of those songs, it really felt like I knew those songs before I'd even listened to them. And there's something about Simon's songwriting that is so clever, that the songs are so well written, that you feel like you know them almost straight away. And I think that's why that's why that band have been successful for so long. Is that the songs are really, really good. And even if you're watching this and you've never listened to the Popguns, please go on YouTube and have a listen to some of the Popguns songs, because they really are brilliant. They're a great band, and I love them to bits.
Yeah, well, that break that we had earlier, Sean just said that he had to go somewhere, so he's just gonna sort of like catch up later. So I think when Sean said goodbye, then it's like, with the Jetstring Pony, because I know that Hannes is still their drummer.
Yeah.
But you sort of like play drums for them. I think it's because you did you produce their album or you did.
So I've done a mixture of different stuff. So on their first release, I think we did the vocal recording here, and I think we did some of the bass. I can't remember exactly, maybe even some drums. But then it was mixed in America by someone else. And then on their most recent release, we did a lot of the recording here, and I mixed it and produced it for them as well. So it's kind of been a gradual journey. We've done a few singles here together as well, and one of the songs they did on the James Bond compilation that the Wedding Present released, which was brilliant. We did the song for that here as well. So they're just lovely guys, and I get on with them so well. I think what kind of happened around the time that I left the Popguns, I was kind of a bit in denial about whether I could actually still play drums with a band. And it just coincided that they had a few gigs that Hannes couldn't make. And for those people that don't know, Hannes lives in Germany, and he's the drummer from the BVs. He's a brilliant drummer, a lovely guy. But obviously, having a band where one of the drummer lives in a different country isn't ideal, and can kind of have logistical issues. So I have filled in for Hannes on a few occasions to help them out. But once I'd kind of done a few, I did kind of realise that actually I think the reason I left the Popguns was I couldn't play gigs comfortably with my carpal tunnel. So trying to do it with a different band didn't work either. It was the same. It took me 2 goes to come to the same conclusion that I needed to get my carpal tunnel sorted first, and then maybe think about playing gigs again. But another great band.
Yeah, I really hope that you'll get sorted soon, because
Thank you.
Yeah, you need to sort of like be out there playing drums.
I'm sure I will be soon. It won't be long, I'm sure.
Well, I want to say hello to Alvin John Santiago. He's watching from Manila. Hello, Alvin.
Hi, Alvin.
Yeah. So when you and I've been sort of like meaning to ask this to other drummers as well, but when you and Sean are together, like when you get together, do you do drum talk, or do you do you sort of like,
Well, I think we probably have done a bit of drum talk, not much, because funnily enough, Sean is actually a guitarist now. Really, he plays. He's a guitarist and lead guitarist for Jetstream Pony. So maybe he's kind of moved into a different world. But I mean, when I was younger, I was obsessed with drums. You know, I used to know every single brand and every single make of drums that they all released. I was obsessed with cymbals. I used to read all the drum magazines. I mean, these days with kids and with kind of busy life and work, it's not quite so easy to be quite so like on the kind of obsession of drums. But I mean, when I was younger, and even now really, I am still kind of obsessed with drum gear and drum stuff, and I'll always be happy to talk to anyone about drums that's even remotely interested in drums. It doesn't like glaze over when you start talking about it.
but when you're so like with a fellow drummer, do you so like I don't know, talk about techniques or talk about sort of like kits and things like that? Or...
I do like that. I mean, often like gigging, like playing gigs with people is great, because when you're supporting other bands or when you're playing with other bands, it's really nice to kind of go and see how other people set up their kits, and often you kind of share gear between bands. I've gotten really well with drummers. Always. I know a lot of people kind of talk about that gigging world, and sometimes with certain bands it can be a bit kind of competitive, but I've always been the opposite. I've always been of the idea that you're all there together, you're kind of working on the same team, and kind of try to kind of be friendly, and I love talking to drummers. I was thinking about your
go ahead.
I was thinking about your channel, Anne, and the fact that you've done so many amazing interviews with so many drummers, that this is going to be such an incredible kind of collection of interviews with drummers. You know, there's people will look back on this in years to come and think Anne has created this incredible like kind of record of drummers. Long may it continue. So it's a great podcast, and well done for putting it all together.
Oh, thank you so much, Tony. No, I find it fascinating, especially when you go to a gig and then you see the drummers, and I always thought like sometimes I feel like they because of their kit. You know, when they go there, they say it up and everything, and then after the gig, they have to sort of like take them all down, take them all away. And I feel like there's so many things that they have to do, and then what the others like. Of course, the singer will just sort of like talk to the fans, or the guitarist will just put the guitar in the cases. But for the drummers, it's different. There's so many things that they have to unscrew and so like put in cases and things like that. So
and then for someone like me, who's also kind of always been interested in kind of like PAs and sounds as well, I've kind of often like in early bands when I was a lot younger, I used to do the drums, set up all the drums, and then I'd help set up the PA, and then and then the lighting, and I used to sometimes sit there thinking the rest of the band are kind of sitting having a coffee or something before the gig, and I'm like complete opposite. I'm like literally don't stop. But you've got to have a certain mentality to be a drummer, haven't you, to want to take that amount of equipment to a gig and to take it all home again afterwards. And but for me, that's always been part of the fun of it. I even now, even after all these years of playing drums, I still really enjoy setting up a drum kit, getting it out of its cases, putting it on stage, getting it set up just how you want it. That is still, almost as exciting as playing the actual gig. It's part of the fun, definitely.
Well, I've got another song. I found another band that you're actually part of. I'm not sure if you're a part of or you produced their record. It's an indie pop band from Brighton called Dream Coaster.
Yes, lovely guys.
I've actually checked their Facebook page as well, so they're still going.
They're still going. Actually, I think they played in Brighton. I think it was on Friday night. I think they played. So again, they're really big fans of Jetstream Pony and the Popguns. So that's how they found me. I've never played drums for them, but I have played gigs with them. So I've played at gigs with them and Jetstream Pony. We played the same bill, and the same. I think they supported the Popguns at my last ever Popguns gig before I stopped playing with them. So so they're very much in our kind of world, and a really cool band. Another band definitely worth checking out. I mixed. They've just released a single on Spin Out Nuggets, which is a fantastic record label, and their single, I mixed it's a double A side, so I mixed one of the A sides, one of the songs on that. on that
Oh,
single
right.
release.
So yeah. So that's why, because I always sort of like check Discogs for so like the drummer that I'm going to interview, and
Yeah,
Dream Coast is one of the sort of like bands that so like attached to your name.
yeah,
So there's
definitely.
yeah.
So there's,
Yeah,
I
go
mean,
ahead.
because of the kind of size of my room and the way that my studio is set up, I often work with singer-songwriters rather than bands. So obviously I do bands as well, but the kind of size of my room and the space here is perfect for that kind of relationship with a singer-songwriter. So especially because I'm a drummer as well, and I can kind of write kind of string parts and keyboard parts to go on songs. Often a singer-songwriter will come here and record their vocals, record guitar, and then I'll kind of record drums for them and record other parts on their songs. So I've just been working with a lovely, very young artist called Hannah Jennifer, and she's definitely worth checking out for anyone that wants something new to listen to. You'll find her on Spotify. But she's a brilliant kind of folky singer-songwriter with a bit of a kind of pop edge to her sound, but she's got an amazing voice, and we've just done an EP together in the studio here, which I mixed as well and produced. So that's definitely worth checking out. It's on Spotify. She's Hannah
What's the
Jennifer.
name?
She's Hannah Jennifer, and she's
Hannah
really good.
Jennifer, right.
Yeah,
So,
she's
because you're not able to sort of like play drums at the moment, you're still sort of like doing producing and
yeah,
mixing for
yeah,
other bands and stuff
exactly.
like that. Yeah.
Yeah,
Right. Well, I'm gonna ask you now about your drumming heroes. Do you have any?
yeah.
Do you have any drumming heroes?
So
Yeah.
it's funny because I was expecting this question, and it's one of those questions where you kind of it's a really hard one to answer. And I watched your interview with Mike Heaton, which was great. I
Oh,
really enjoyed that. And funnily enough, I used to go and watch Embrace. I really liked Embrace, kind of around the time they were kind of first broke out. I remember going to see them in Brighton. They were kind of one of those bands when I was kind of quite early getting into music, and I really liked them, and I used to kind of try and play along with their songs. So it was really nice to see his interview on your channel. But he said it's probably the same as me. If I had to choose one drummer who's had more influence than anyone else, it would probably be John Bonham. Again, because kind of listening to Led Zeppelin with Dad, and he is so different to anyone else. He's such a unique talent. The way he plays drums is so incredible and can't be copied by anyone really. That I think for that reason, and the way that he puts kind of almost like a kind of bluesiness into everything he plays, a kind of shuffle and a kind of swing into the way that he plays. It's just always been just one of those guys that you just think has probably had more influence on me than anyone.
yeah.
But there are other drummers as well. I mean, I was a Nirvana kid as well when I was a lot younger. I really liked obviously Dave Grohl, and I'm sure
Dave
most
Grohl,
people
yeah.
say that he's just such an incredible guy and a great drummer. I've always been a big fan of drummers who write parts for songs. So I've never been a guy who's particularly interested in drum solos or kind of overly complicated drum parts. What I really love is when someone comes up with a part that really adds something to the song, and that's what I've always tried to do with the Popguns as well, and with anything else I've played on. I've tried to write parts that aren't about drums, they're about making the song better. That's about supporting everything else that's there, and it's about just making the song kind of come alive or give it a certain energy, so drummers that can do that. So one of my favorite drummers is Matt Cameron, who plays with Pearl Jam, and I'm really into like the kind of Seattle grunge scene, so Pearl Jam and Soundgarden and Alice in Chains and Mudhoney, all of those type of bands I've always been kind of really into. So so he's one of my favorite drummers. I really like kind of more modern drummers. I really like Ben Johnson, who plays with Biffy Clyro. Again, I think he writes really interesting drum parts, which are really creative, but they're kind of really intricate and complicated, but they don't take away from the song. They're still very much involved in creating the kind of overall feel of the song. So I really like his style as well. So I think that's probably what I like.
It's funny how you say you're into sort of like grunge, and you were talking about your band that was sort of like doing grunge kind of music before you became a member of the Popguns. But then like when you talk about the Popguns and Jetstream Pony, and I think Dream Coaster, they're also like indie pop, which
Yeah.
is so like different from what you really love.
Well,
How do you?
the thing is I've always loved music that kind of has real musicians. So I've never really kind of listened to a lot of kind of electronic music. Most of the music I've always listened to has been bands, so it's been musicians, guitar-based music. So that's kind of taken me down different routes. It can sometimes I listen to blues, sometimes it's grunge,
Yeah.
sometimes it's indie, and definitely my musical learning and my first band was very much a kind of indie band, The Drive. They were very much indie, and the bands that I grew up listening to when I first got into music was kind of The Verve, was Oasis,
Okay.
it
Yeah. Yeah.
was Manic Street Preachers, Ocean Colour Scene. They were the bands that I really was into when I first was discovering my own music. So I've definitely got a kind of background in indie, maybe kind of 90s indie, and then the grunge thing kind of runs alongside. So yeah, I guess
Yeah.
as a music producer, it's no harm to kind of, I don't know, have influences from lots
Like
of different
yeah,
areas.
that's right. Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah. Well, do you still? I know, you have kids and they're still young, but do you still go to lots of gigs, or
I
only
wish
when
I
you're
did.
gigging?
Yeah, so it tends to be, when I was gigging fairly regularly, that would kind of be the time I could get out, would be to go and play gigs. There wasn't really time in my schedule to then kind of
Go
go
to
to
other
gigs.
gigs?
And
Yeah.
I love going to gigs and I love seeing other bands. And I'm lucky really because I've played a lot of gigs over my life and I've been able to watch a lot of other bands while I'm gigging. So that's been
Yeah.
great. I do still go to gigs, but it's occasional. It's not a regular thing. We've got a lovely venue down in Brighton called the Concord. I don't know whether have you ever been
Oh
there
yeah,
before?
yeah. I've heard. Yeah,
It's,
I've actually not been to Brighton for a gig, but I've heard of that.
oh,
I've heard of that
oh,
venue. Yeah.
you should come. You should definitely come. It's a great place. So the Wedding Presents Festival at the Edge of the Sea is always held at the Concord.
Yeah.
They do
Yeah.
every year. So that's a great venue. So I've been to see bands there. I'm trying to think. So Mudhoney I've seen there a couple of times there, and yeah, I do try and get out to gigs when I can, but it's not. You put me to shame, man. I watch because obviously I follow you on Facebook, and I'm just in awe of how many gigs you get to. It's incredible. It really is. I think you deserve an
Well,
award.
oh no, no, it's all right. No, I'm always curious about musicians when they go to a gig because it's different for us fans. I mean, like for me, when I go to a gig, I always sort of like try and make sure that because I love all the bands, but I just particularly love seeing the drummers because I think they're amazing. But it's I'm curious about sort of like musicians, especially drummers like yourself.
Yeah.
When you go to a gig, do you do you actually try and watch the drummer, or and do you sort of like do you
Yeah.
maybe try and talk to them afterwards, and
I do sometimes,
I
yeah,
don't know.
I do.
Like,
I'm not as bad as I used to be, actually. I used to be awful. I used to just sit and watch just the drummer. I just wouldn't put anything out. But also for me, because I've obviously worked as a live sound engineer as well and a lighting engineer, I tend to just I find it very hard just to go and enjoy a gig. I'm kind of constantly analysing the mix and the lighting and that it's very hard just to kind of be neutral. I feel a bit envious of people that can just
oh,
go to gigs and just enjoy it as a gig. Whereas for me, it's like it's kind of it's work in a way. So it's kind of it's constant analysis and
right.
over analysing everything that's going on. And so yeah, so it's the same when I listen to music as well, really. So, but that's just the nature of the beast, isn't it? That's just what happens when you're
Yeah.
working in that world, I suppose.
Well, maybe you sort of like just become a fan and just
Yeah,
so it's like, do you know, it's I've just posted this on Facebook earlier, but it really I find it really really amazing and incredible. It's like refreshing when I saw Beth at the Orchids gig, and she was just really enjoying it, doing banter as well, and so
yeah,
like dancing. And Amelia Fletcher as well was there, and they're just really enjoying and being a fan, like being fans like me and
yeah,
other fans in there.
yeah,
I just thought, wow, this is incredible.
yeah,
It's like the people that I want to have photos with because they've been on stage and they've been really awesome,
Yeah.
and yet they're there as fans just
Yeah.
watching the same band I was watching.
And it's the same. I mean, it's the same with the Popguns as well. Their kind of knowledge of music is incredible, you know, like, and the same with Jetstream Pony. They are all massive music fans, and they go to gigs. They know other bands. They're up to date with the releases. You know, they really are, all of them, not just musicians.
Yeah.
They're true music fans, all of them, and it's so lovely. That's kind of really endearing, I think, for a lot of people.
Yeah, that is true, because it's like sometimes you ask people and they won't, of course, I mean, they concentrate on their own, so like, you know, making their own music and stuff, and then they tend to sort of like not know anything else and not heard of any other sort of like bands. But with Beth, it's like, oh my God.
But the thing is,
just so nice. Yeah.
I read a lot of kind of music autobiographies. It's one of the things I like reading, is kind of like, you know, and they always tend to say, a lot of people, they really know music. You know, if you read kind of autobiographies of great artists, they always seem to say the same thing, which is they all have kind of genned up and studied what came before them, and not just kind of a little bit. You know, they know every detail of what, and they've studied music, and they know every detail of the kind of artists that influenced them. So I think maybe that kind of obsession with music is kind of essential. If you want to be successful in the music industry, you kind of need to kind of study. You need to understand the music industry and know it inside out a little bit, I think. So, yeah. I don't know how people find time, to be honest. I don't know where the time in the day comes from. I'm always amazed. I spoke about Simon from the Popguns earlier. I don't know how he finds so much time. I mean, he's a real another person who knows everything. Every artist, you know, he has got an incredible music knowledge, like Beth as well, you know, of music and what's going on and gigs. And I don't know how he finds time to gen up on it all.
No, it's really good when they do that. I just think, you know, when they're also fans, I mean, they're also musicians, and they're also like fans. I think that's incredible. It's so good
Definitely.
to hear and to know. Right, so disasters, drumming disasters. You mentioned earlier that you saw like in Greece, you know, in Athens.
I think that one's. I think that one's going to be hard to beat, to be honest. I'm not sure I can come up with a bigger disaster than that. That was pretty disastrous, falling backwards off the stage, having having an ambulance called. I think we'll just stick with that, shall we? I think we'll have to leave that one there.
Yeah. And also, you know, your wrist operation as well, which I really saw. Like, fingers crossed, it will heal quickly and soon. The last one that I'm gonna ask you is being a music teacher, and also got a professional sort of like degree in drums. What would sort of like your best advice to sort of like people who wanted to be on you know, to be part of the music industry, or especially so like if they wanted to be a drummer?
That's a great question, actually.
Best advice.
Yeah, that's a great question. And funny enough, just a couple of days ago, I heard someone say the thing that I really disagree with, which is I can't play the drums. I just haven't got it inside me. And I think that's really not true, because having been a drum teacher for a lot of years, playing the drums isn't something you're just born able to do. It is something that anyone can do if they want to, and it's just learning how. It's just having the kind of desire. I don't really kind of strongly believe in kind of talent as such, as kind of as a born thing. I think people that play drums and people that play music, they just have that kind of inner desire to want to do it, and then they find a way of making that happen. So I think for kind of kids that I teach the drums to, what I want them to realize is that being able to play the drums should be something you enjoy, you know, and if you can get that right, and as a music teacher, if you can get that right with kids, if you can make them enjoy it first, there's plenty of time after that to kind of get them into, you know, into learning and making it more serious. But if you haven't kind of installed that passion when they first start learning, then you're off to a losing start, I think. So music should be enjoyable. You know, we play music because we enjoy it. Should be fun, especially for kids, particularly for kids. Drum lessons should be fun. So that's what I'd say. Anyone can play the drums if they want to. It's just about having the desire, and maybe having somewhere where you can make a lot of noise helps as well, doesn't it? That's the other thing.
There's still hope for me then.
Yeah, and I would just book into the studio. You can come down for a drum lesson.
Yeah, that would be good. I'll probably just sort of like watch it. No, you do it. I'll just watch you play.
I would love to give you a drum lesson.
Oh, that would be awesome. That would be really
You'd have to
good.
find a gig you want to come to in Brighton, and then you can come for a drum lesson in the afternoon, and then you can go to the gig in the evening. It'll be perfect.
Oh my God, that would be really good. Yeah, I hope someday. I mean, I've never been to Brighton, so no, I have been to Brighton, but just for to see the pavilion.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, because my mum was here, like, when she was still alive in late 90s, so I took her to Brighton, but not for a gig. I'd love to go to Brighton for a gig, and maybe yes, I will go to your studio and try and learn something, because I've always had this idea that you've got to be born with born with it, and because I did try, but
this isn't mine. But I heard someone describe it once, that if you've got a heartbeat, then you've got rhythm inside you, and it's just about finding a way of expressing that on a drum kit. That all of our bodies have got kind of a rhythmic beat within inside them. And it's just playing the drums is finding a way to kind of bring that out. So I think anyone can learn to play the drums.
I wish I'd sort of like spoken to you before, because I had my chance to sort of like, when I was asked to sort of like learn how to play the drums and you can be in my band, and I was like, okay, I will do it. and then I tried it. I had sort of like 3 lessons, but didn't learn anything, because I was just sort of like watching him and said, okay, no, you play, I watch. Oh, yeah, someday I will do that. I will go.
Sounds great.
Thank you so much, Tony. I really enjoyed chatting to you. I've learned a lot from you as well. You're also like a genius. I mean, you know everything.
It's not true.
Thank you so much.
It's my pleasure. I've really enjoyed it too. Thank you for having me.
Oh no, thanks for saying yes to Ask the Drummer, and get well soon.
Thank you.
And hopefully I'll see you at a gig. If not Brighton, maybe in Manchester or wherever. So, yeah. All right. Thank you. Thanks.
Enjoy the rest of your day.
Yeah, you too. But I'm going to a gig later tonight as well, so I'm going to definitely enjoy it. So.
Amazing. I should have guessed. I should have known that already.
It's Pete Wiley tonight. So.
Okay. Enjoy.
Yeah, thank you. See ya.
Bye.
Bye. Oh, thank you so much for joining us live. I really, really enjoyed that chat with Tony. He's amazing. I mean, he's incredible, knowing everything about music and producing and recording and all these engineering work and stuff. Hopefully he'll get better soon, and he'll be able to go back playing drums for either the Popguns or Jetstream Pony or any other band. And once again, thank you everyone, and enjoy the rest of the weekend, what's left of it. And as always, love music, love life, and love drummers. And do keep an eye out for next week's guest announcement post. It's going to be another awesome drummer for next week. Okay, bye for now. Bye.